Ensuring that everyone benefits from the gains of development is one of the challenges we face as Africa thrives under surging economic and population growth rates. Growth is dependent upon utilities. Between a prosperous society with expanding opportunity and one where people struggle with poverty and vulnerability, their provision can make a difference. Electricity alone can increase household income by up to 39%. It is unfortunate that Africa is still an energy-hungry continent. Only 25% of sub-Saharan Africans have access to electricity. Population, urbanization, and economic productivity will increase the demand. For 15% of the year, people connected to a power grid experience an average of 54 days of power downtime. The high demand also has a great influence on the prices of electricity, and that is what we are going to be talking about today. In today's video, we are going to be listing Africa's top 10 countries with the most expensive electricity costs. Let's start. 10. Sierra Leone. Sierra Leone has an average electricity price of 15 cents per kilowatt hour. This is equivalent to about $3.06 per day and $111 per month. Only 15% of the total population and just 25% of the population in rural areas have access to electricity. Sierra Leone is endowed with energy potentials like solar power, hydro, and biomass from agricultural wastes. Around 80% of the energy used is in the form of fuelwood. Imported petroleum products make up 13% of energy consumption and are used for power generation. The power sector has less than 150 megawatts of energy capacity, connecting less than 150,000 customers with the cost of electricity heavily subsidized. The hydro projects are greatly disadvantaged in dry seasons. For example, the major hydropower facility, Bombuna Dam, has a reduced output during the dry season. There have been insufficient investments and limited private sector participation in the energy sector. So the government is focused on improving governance and regulation in order to encourage private sector participation. Special financial incentives are being provided to investors in the renewable energy sector to promote the use of liquefied natural gas and liquefied petroleum gas. Private independent power producers are being invited to enter the industry and support the government in achieving this goal. 9. Senegal. Senegalese pay 18 cents for every 1 kilowatt hour of electricity. This is about $4.32 per day and $133.92 per month. The Senegalese energy sector is relatively small. The total fossil fuel provision is 27 terawatts a year and makes up nearly 40% of the total primary energy provision. The rest is non-renewable and supplemented by some coal, hydro, and solar. 12% of households use gas for cooking, 4% use electricity, and 1% use lamp oil. In Dakar, where 20% of the population live, more than 90% of households have a stove. Electricity consumption in households is still limited, and cooking is the largest share of energy consumption. For larger villages and areas with a lot of people, rural electrification is a concern. Half of the rural population lives in small villages that are not attractive to private investors due to high investment costs and low revenues. The government of Senegal is, however, taking steps in improving the electricity situation by offering loans to private operators. It is also one of the country's goals to commit to renewable resources. The target is to increase the share of renewable resources to 20% by 2025. One of the steps taken was when the first phase of the Taba Ndiaye wind park was launched on February 2020. When finished, this utility-scale wind project will be the largest in West Africa and is supposed to increase the country's electricity supply by 15% and generate 400 gigawatts-hour of electricity. Before we go any further, make sure to subscribe to The New Tourist and turn on the bell icon to get notified whenever we post videos like this. Don't forget to like and share this video with your friends and family. 8. Uganda. Uganda has a household electricity price of 19 cents per kilowatt hour. It would cost $4.56 per day and $141.36 per month. In urban areas, 57.2% of Ugandans have access to electricity. However, access drops to 10% in rural areas. Uganda has approximately 3,431 kilometers of transmission lines, which the government aims to increase to 4,354 kilometers by the year 2025. Due to Uganda's unreliable transmission and distribution systems, analysts believe a large suppressed demand exists. Despite these energy projects, Uganda has one of the lowest electrification rates in Africa. Uganda's largest hydropower project, the 600-megawatt Karuma hydropower dam, is slated to come fully online by June 2023. The addition of the Karuma hydropower dam is projected to increase Uganda's total capacity by 44.7% and potentially leave over 1,000 megawatts of excess power generation capacity. 7. Togo. The average price for electricity in Togo is 20 cents per kilowatt hour. The daily amount is $4.08, and the monthly cost is $148.06. Some of the electricity is locally produced, but the majority is imported from Ghana and Nigeria. In 2010, Togo's first independent power producer, Contour Global, launched its first utility-scale solar plant. Since then, the electricity supply has tripled. One of the objectives of the government of Togo is to increase private sector investment in the power sector and attract off-grid companies to increase access to electricity in rural areas. A legal framework to promote renewable energy and a new off-grid rural electrification strategy is part of the national strategy for universal access by 2030. 6. Kenya. Kenyan households pay an average price of 22 cents for every kilowatt hour of electricity. This is $5.28 per day and $163.68 per month. In the mid-1990s, independent power producers were allowed to enter the market in Kenya. An active private sector, a long track record of being a credit-worthy off-taker, and abundant renewable energy resources are some of the factors that contribute to the good fortune of the country. The high cost of production and high inflation is reflected in the electricity price. The deployment of emergent power is 4 times more expensive than the average power price because of the higher electricity demand. It costs about $320 to connect to the national grid. These are relatively high costs that pose a major obstacle to the expansion of electricity connections to low-income households and small businesses, which can be done with the use of alternative sources of energy, such as solar. 5. Gabon. The cost of a kilowatt per hour is 22 cents. That is $5.28 per day and $163.68 per month for every household in Gabon. Unlike Burkina Faso, Gabon has more electricity access, over 90%, compared to the 20% in Burkina Faso. The Ministry of Oil and Gas and the Ministry of Energy are both responsible for the energy sector. The country's total land area is 85% forest, making it a primary energy source for supplying the domestic sector needs. Fossil fuels and hydropower are the country's 2 main energy sources. Out of the total produced electricity in 2015, 51.7% was generated from hydro and 48.2% was from fossil fuels. In comparison to other countries in the region, Gabon has a good rate of electrification, with almost all of the population having access to electricity. Between 2008 and 2010, there was a significant rise in the electrification rate, yet it started to slow down from 2010 to 2013. In the year 2016, the country's imported electricity capacity was 344 million kilowatts-hours with no export capacity at all. The costs in relation to imported electricity have to be covered by the electricity prices, causing them to be high. The government of Gabon is working on supplying energy regionally, as well as creating the correct infrastructures to attain this goal. This will, however, be very costly and might take time to achieve. 4. Burkina Faso. A kilowatt-hour of electricity in Burkina Faso costs 22 cents. That's a daily cost of $5.28 and a monthly cost of $163.68. less than 5% of the rural population has access to electricity. This causes the rural communities to rely on expensive and harmful alternatives like kerosene, batteries, and candles to meet their basic energy needs and have no access to electricity to meet these needs. Most schools and hospitals in cities, as well as rural areas, have no electricity supply at all. This highlights the fact that not only are the electricity costs very high, but there is also a low supply to the high demand for electricity. The high electricity costs are mostly due to the fact that Burkina Faso depends largely on imported energy like oil, making the country vulnerable to ongoing fluctuations in oil prices. The high production costs are also a factor in the increasing electricity costs. The government has taken steps into improving this situation by introducing legislation to encourage investments from the private sector and liberalize electricity generation and distribution. The government made a plan for economic and social development in 2016 with the goal to increase energy access by 400% and double the number of customers from 500,000 to 1 million. The National Agency for Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency in Burkina Faso is also seeking to encourage the use of renewable energy, especially in rural areas. 3. Mali. Mali has a price of 23 cents for every 1 kilowatt-hour of electricity. If not for the inconsistent electricity supply, Malian households would have to pay approximately $5.52 a day and $171.12 a month for electricity. Although Mali is endowed with plentiful solar and hydro potential, the current generation capacity relies on a combination of diesel, hydro, and residual fuel oil. The current power production is less than 700 milliwatt capacity and can barely sustain the growing need of Mali's population of approximately 20 million people. The business sector, as well as the mining sector, one of the most important sectors in Mali, are also disadvantaged by the inconsistent electricity supplies. The state-owned electric utility is poorly managed and heavily subsidized by the government and regional multinational banks, as the relatively high price of its electricity is not enough to cover the cost of production and distribution. This means that decreasing the electricity costs is currently not even an option, as they can barely break even. Electricity demand grows at about 12% per year, far outpacing increases in supply. The government of Mali is, however, adopting measures to promote public-private partnerships to facilitate foreign direct investment in critical energy and infrastructure projects. The government also has a goal to increase the use of renewable energy like solar and wind production to 28% of the generation mix by 2033. There is also a need to develop partnerships that would result in the development of their underutilized resources, like hydroelectric power of approximately 800 milliwatts and over 300 milliwatts of biomass energy. 2. Cape Verde. The price of electricity in Cape Verde is 25 cents per kilowatt hour. For context, this would translate to $6 per day and $186 per month, assuming households here have access to 24-hour electricity. Almost all of the 10 islands in Cape Verde have access to electricity, but almost one-third of the 550,000 residents rely on charcoal and firewood for cooking. The high energy costs are a result of the fact that Cape Verde is a net importer of energy. Its electricity is produced by generators that run on imported petroleum products. Cape Verde has, however, started to diversify its energy portfolio. Electricity production in 2016 was 443 gigawatts per hour, of which 81% was from thermal power, 17% from wind power, and 1% from solar power. Cape Verde has a variety of resources and technologies to choose from, like wind resources, geothermal resources, and marine energy. Cape Verde wants to get 50% of its electricity from renewable energy resources by the year 2030. The goal is to bring down energy import costs and help the environment by reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Ocean thermal energy conversion also has the potential to be utilized with help from emerging technologies. Assuming that all goes well, the reduction of import costs will most likely lead to decreased electricity prices in Cape Verde. 1. Rwanda. Rwandan households pay an average of 26 cents per kilowatt hour of electricity. This would translate to $6.24 per day and $194.44 per month, assuming that the people of Rwanda have 24-hour electricity. Lake Kivu in the west of the country is endowed with natural energy resources, including hydro, solar, and methane gas. Roughly half of the country has access to electricity. The government of Rwanda, development partners, and the private sector are working together to address the affordability of off-grid solutions. Close to 100% of the population has access to electricity in urban areas, but less than 35% in rural areas. A large number of power purchase agreements were signed with independent power producers to increase generation capacity in a bid to position Rwanda as a services hub for East and Central Africa. The government is shifting its focus to increasing access as the supply is projected to exceed demand. We've come to the end of this video. Those were the 10 African countries with the most expensive electricity rates in 2022. Please let us know that you loved this video by liking and sharing. Also, leave your thoughts in the comments and subscribe to our channel too. Thank you for watching and see you in our next video.